July 30th, 1966 was the day that football came home. It proved what the nation wanted to believe. England were the best, and England expected them to remain so. They were wrong. The glory was now.
The day was, and has been, the greatest day of my life. So you had everything in that football match. And you know you've had everything in a football match because every day from that day to this, it's mentioned at some stage in my 24 hours by someone.
Can we just have one word for ITN?
Yes, sure.
How do you feel about the game?
Oh, delighted, naturally.
How do you feel now?
Oh, over the world, over the world.
Well done, Alan. How do you feel about the game?
Fabulous.
Any worrying moments? Any worrying moments?
I thought we was invincible until they scored the first goal and they proved me wrong.
How do you feel about things, Jackie?
Bobby,
Bobby, I'm sorry.
you don't have to ask me, really, dear.
What do you think of the game itself?
Very, very hard and tough.
Tens of thousands of people flooded into central London. The players were mobbed as they arrived at the Royal Garden Hotel. Trafalgar Square was packed with delirious supporters.
I don't remember how I got to central London. It must have been on the tube. I didn't walk it. You were just high. And I finished up in Trafalgar Square. Anywhere around the centre of London, if you walked into a pub with either a match ticket or a match programme, you got free beer. Lovely. We set off with a conga. And it went from the Trafalgar Square and down the Mall. And they wouldn't let us into Buckhouse. But the banter and that was absolutely tremendous. And then I thought, well, it's about time I went and had a sort of few wades through the fountains here, which is when it was all captured on celluloid. I had a Scooter Parker on. Sewn across the shoulders was a black and white scarf, and halfway across the back, FULHAM, picked out in white lettering.
Prime Minister Harold Wilson joined Alf Ramsey and the players for a more formal celebration.
We were too tired to celebrate immediately, of course. What I do remember is the them and us situation we had with officialdom, and where my wife was downstairs in one restaurant and I was upstairs in another one. We never allowed to join the celebrations, and that was dreadful.
Eventually we did all meet up, and I couldn't believe it, and Bobby certainly couldn't. We walked out and there were these thousands of fans. Bobby's there and there's all these arms reaching up to him, and it was like he was almost a god. It was like the atmosphere was superb. We went to the Playboy Club, which was fun. And Bobby, I don't think many people know, but is a thwarted singer. And my memories of Bobby that night was being obviously overjoyed, but singing Stevie Wonder songs to the wee small hours of the morning.
I was running the music in the Playboy then, and the boys came over, and suddenly one of the maitre d's came up and said, "Oh, Burt Bacharach's downstairs." And now David, who, you know, the right songwriters, they might if they join you. So I said, "No, come up." And Bert came up and he was all over Bobby like a rash. Bobby was really pleased because he loved singers and writers and people in the theatre and all that. And they stayed with us till 2 or 3 in the morning.
And of course all the bunnies were coming over and having photographs, and everyone was just sort of wanting to be with these superheroes.
No one is better than I know I'm just an average guy. No football hero or school guy.
I knew that I had been party to something enormous. Those things, the music, winning the World Cup, the whole kind of 60s epoch gave the young Brit a kind of an awareness of their own beauty somehow.
Bobby Moore was perhaps the first golden boy icon of English football. Footballers went from being sort of the muddied oafs of the parks to becoming required dinner party guests in trendy West London.
When he came up, it was like the breakthrough, wasn't it, really, of the class sort of system was breaking down, and boys from the East End or Cockneys were sort of mixing with the aristocracy. I mean, it all got muddled up.
Bobby was the figurehead of that, as well as being the figurehead of the World Cup and what that meant to England. They were the first couple of football, weren't they? And Tina, for a while, was the first lady of football.
The moment I wake up, before I put on my makeup, I say a little prayer for you. And while I'm combing my hair now, and wondering what dress to wear now, I say a little prayer for you.
Bobby Moore's the first footballer I probably got to know, because he crossed the show business element of life more than the others, really, him and George Best. And he was the sort of golden boy of football. So he was a natural to take pictures with, and he had a very beautiful wife, Tina. And they were just a natural golden couple.
I love the colorful clothes you wear, and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair.
It was just then that women were starting to get interested in football after the '66 World Cup. So you could put a husband and wife. People before never even used to think who they were married to. So they were near to a top movie star couple as you could find, really.
I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. I'm picking up.
I noticed in my life there was a difference. Even without Bobby, it was like, are you Tina Moore? I can remember I used to go out without makeup on one on. Someone said to me, goodness me, you know, you can look really nice when you're dressed up. You should be dressed up all the time. And people then had an expectation from me. So I think we both, in a way, had to be a little bit more aware of how we looked.
Tina's not the best dart player in the world, but she enjoys the game while she's waiting for me. After a match, we often meet our wives for a quiet drink in the local. It's a nice, friendly place. Tina reckons I'd rigged the darts. It's not true. Anyway, it's great to get together for an evening out.
Like Mr. and Mrs. Bobby Moore, looking at the locals.
This is a man's world. This is a man's world. But it wouldn't be nothing, nothing without a woman or a girl.
There was something sort of magnificent about Bobby Moore. He'd become like this kind of like god of war somehow. He was kind of giant-sized, you know, because he was this angelic-looking guy that was like as tough as nails.
In 1970, Bobby Moore led England into their first World Cup song. It reached #1.
Footballers had reached the top of the hit parade, and there we were, top of the pops, all in dinner suits, you know, dicky bows and everything else, pans people.
Back Home is a genuinely great, rabble-rousing football song, and you know, it's a song that, you know, when I find it in my old 7-inch record collection, it's an exciting thing with the pale blue label, and I can picture, you know, I can really picture the Back Home.
And when I hear it sometimes now, oh dear, I sort of turn away in disgust.
They sound like a football team, they don't sound like a choir.
The World Cup was in Mexico. It would be hot and humid. The matches would be played at altitude. But England expected to do well.
Back home, we'll be thinking about us when we are far away. We used to love that song, and all the lads, when I used to sing it, lads used to join in with me and like to sing it. It was a very, very lovely song.
Actually, I think he's a better singer than he is a footballer, Jeff, to be honest.
England flew out to Colombia to acclimatise to the heat. The players were confident. They were world champions. They were a better team than '66. They had Bobby Moore. But from this moment, it all went wrong.
I was in bed and I had a phone call about 2 o'clock in the morning from a reporter, and they said to me, have you heard what's happened to Bobby? Something dreadful's happened. And I went, oh my God, has he been in an accident or something? And they went, no, he's been accused of stealing a bracelet. And I said, oh, don't be ridiculous. I said, I really don't appreciate this at this time of night, and I've hung up the phone. At first, it's like I was in a state of total disbelief. You know, this is absolutely ridiculous, absurd. He's going to be released at any minute. But he wasn't.
I was actually in the shop when Bobby was accused of doing that, which was the biggest load of bunkum you've ever seen in your life, you know. I mean, we stood there looking at different things, and I mean, how he supposedly have pinched a ring or whatever he was supposed to, because the rings are under security glass and you can't get in anywhere near to anything.
In the space of seconds, policemen were around us pointing guns at us. The girl had come out and accusing us of stealing a bracelet, and the one she pointed at was Mauro.
I feel awful. I love football very much. I had never seen England play, but I imagine they must play beautiful. And I'm very depressed, and I can assure you that I feel very sorry for Bobby Moore. That is not my fault, and I'm sorry.
There we were, having a jolly good lunch, no complaints at all. And suddenly word came that Bobby Moore was in trouble. He'd been arrested. He said, before you go off to jail, be assured we are doing our damnedest to look after you and present your case and get you released in time to go to Mexico.
It was on TV every hour, and I mean, I got really upset. Then it really hit home, and I mean, I just couldn't believe this.
The situation is quite simply this. No England player or official will comment on any news from Colombia until Bobby Moore is safely in Mexico and back with the party.
The British press tended to think that, wow, this was an absolute scandalous attempt by Latin Americans to thwart us in the World Cup. And it was a real sort of to-do.
Bobby was in the consul's house, and I rang up and I said, it's Kenny Lynch, and he said, only his family can speak to him. I said, I'm his brother. So I was thinking, hope Bobby doesn't say, I'm not a brother, you know what I mean? So he said, but you just said your name was Lynch. I said, that's my stage name. I said, I'm his... Thank God he couldn't see me, the guy. He know straight away I was fibbing, wouldn't he? And Bobby came to the phone. He said, don't you come over here. Bobby said to me, he said, I'll get 10 years if you turn up.
There was not enough evidence to detain Moore. They didn't dismiss the case. By no means the case hung over Moore and the British authorities for a long time. But effectively, and that was what mattered, he was free to go to Mexico.
It's obviously been a difficult last few days for you. How do you feel now you're 20,000 feet over Colombia?
Well, I must insist that this is the first time I really enjoy flying, and I must say I'm delighted to be heading back to Mexico to meet up with the rest of the lads.
Did you expect him to be freed, really?
Oh, yes, because, you know, right from the start, I couldn't, you know, it seems just ludicrous. It's just as I expected. It's been very worrying, though. I mean, it really disturbed Bobby, because for years after, people would say to him, you know, got the bracelet, and it was like crazy, and it took a long while to get the whole thing cleared.
Tina flew out to join Bobby and the rest of the team. She even took him a present.
But the funny thing is, I bought him a bracelet. An ID bracelet, just as a little fun thing. So that was that. So he did get a bracelet in Mexico, but from me, not from the shop.